Back in 2006, I was serving as the team sergeant for a United States Army Special Forces operational detachment. That deployment marked my third combat tour in Iraq. Our team operated out of Forward Operating Base Apache, located in the Adamiyah district, a suburb of Baghdad. From the time the war began in 2003, Adamiyah had remained one of the strongest Sunni-controlled areas in the capital. By the time we arrived in 2006, the balance of power had shifted. Shiite militias were steadily forcing Sunni fighters out of many parts of Baghdad. Even so, Adamiyah remained fiercely contested because it was home to the Abu Hanifa Mosque, one of the most significant Sunni religious sites in Iraq. The Sunni population had no intention of surrendering control of that neighborhood while such an important landmark remained there. Around February of 2006, extremists bombed a major Shiite mosque in Samarra. That single attack ignited widespread sectarian violence across Iraq. Shiites retaliated against Sunnis. Sunnis retaliated against Shiites. American forces suddenly found themselves trapped in the middle of an escalating civil war. That was exactly where my team was stationed, operating in one of the deadliest environments anywhere in the country. Our primary assignment focused on intelligence collection rather than direct combat. We spent countless hours identifying insurgent networks, gathering information, and supporting larger operations. At Forward Operating Base Apache, we worked closely with soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division. Their responsibility was to train and fight alongside the Iraqi army while maintaining security throughout Adamiyah. Early in our deployment, both units made an agreement. If either organization found itself in trouble, the other would respond without hesitation. That understanding would soon be tested. On the 17th of April, 2006, we woke expecting nothing more than an administrative day. Even during war, paperwork, maintenance, and equipment upgrades never stopped. We planned to travel to Baghdad International Airport so our Humvees could receive improved gun turrets equipped with heavier ballistic glass. Those upgrades would provide better protection for our gunners against small arms fire, improvised explosive devices, and other battlefield threats. We also intended to replenish supplies before returning to base. Before we ever rolled out, however, we knew something was wrong. Heavy fighting had erupted practically across the street from our compound. Automatic weapons echoed through the neighborhood. Explosions rattled the buildings around us. The sound alone told us that the soldiers from the 101st Airborne were deeply engaged. We contacted them over the radio and asked if they needed immediate assistance. Their response was straightforward. No, we've got it under control. With that answer, we continued with our original plan. We drove into the Green Zone, checked in with our company headquarters, and prepared to continue toward Baghdad International Airport. Just as we were about to leave headquarters, everything changed. My team leader, Chris Denham, received word that the situation in Adamiyah had deteriorated. The soldiers from the 101st Airborne were now requesting help. Chris reached me using one of the embassy-issued cellular telephones we all carried. He told me the message was simple. The situation has changed. They need support. For us, there was no debate. Whenever American troops were actively engaged with the enemy, you answered the call. I immediately informed Chris that we were turning around. We would return to Adamiyah and link up with our partners at Antar Square, a well-known location inside the district. At that point, we still had very little information. We knew only that friendly forces were pinned down and needed reinforcements. Adamiyah was already one of the most dangerous places in Iraq, so we understood we were driving straight into an uncertain situation. Our convoy was unusually small. Most military convoys operating in Iraq at that time consisted of 4, 6, or even 8 vehicles. We had only 2 gun trucks. Inside those 2 vehicles rode 6 Green Berets, including me, along with our Iraqi interpreter. 7 men total. It was a small force, but we carried enough firepower to make a difference. Every man on my team was experienced, aggressive, and heavily supplied with ammunition. We knew exactly what we were capable of. As we approached Antar Square, the enemy welcomed us immediately. Rocket-propelled grenades streaked toward our position. Heavy machine gun fire hammered the streets. Assault rifles cracked from multiple directions. Before making any decisions, I needed to understand what we had just driven into. Most firefights during that period followed a familiar pattern. Insurgents usually relied on harassment tactics. They would fire a few bursts, launch an attack, and then disappear into the civilian population before American forces could bring overwhelming combat power against them. This battle felt completely different. The amount of incoming fire was far heavier than anything we normally encountered. I linked up with the Iraqi Army commander to receive a quick situation report. Almost immediately, I realized this was far more serious than a typical hit-and-run attack. The insurgents were not retreating. They were maneuvering aggressively toward both the Iraqi Army and the soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division. That alone told me everything I needed to know. They had come looking for a fight. After gathering the available information, I shared my recommendations with the Iraqi commander and explained how I believed we should move forward. At the same time, I wanted to establish contact with our American partners before committing my detachment to the fight. When we finally reached the soldiers from the 101st Airborne, they confirmed what the Iraqi commander had already told me. They had been fighting continuously for nearly 5 hours. Enemy fighters had repeatedly maneuvered against their positions. They were pinned down. Their ammunition was running dangerously low. They had requested reinforcements, but none had arrived until we rolled into the fight. I'll continue with part 2, picking up immediately from this point without skipping any details. Once I had a clear picture of the situation, I made my decision. The streets of Adamiyah followed a fairly simple layout. One main road ran through the district, with countless narrow side streets branching off in every direction. Most of the enemy fire was coming from those side streets. Every time our forces tried to move forward along the main avenue, insurgents opened up from concealed positions tucked away inside those intersections. I decided that my 2 gun trucks would take the fight directly to them. Instead of sitting in place and absorbing fire, we would drive the main road, turn into each side street, and overwhelm every hostile position we encountered. My goal was simple. I wanted to disrupt their attack, force them to react to us, and give our soldiers enough breathing room to regain the initiative. The first few side streets proved exactly how determined the enemy was. An insurgent vehicle suddenly accelerated toward our position. It closed the distance fast. Before long, it was only about 50 to 75 yards away. The vehicle came to a stop, and several fighters jumped out carrying rocket-propelled grenade launchers and Kalashnikov assault rifles. They were preparing to engage us at close range. Fortunately, one of the best machine gunners I had ever served with was already tracking them. Brian Rainwater was behind the .50 caliber machine gun. Before joining our detachment, he had spent years mastering that weapon system. He understood every capability it possessed and handled it with remarkable precision. The moment those insurgents exposed themselves, Brian opened fire. His rounds struck with devastating accuracy. Within seconds, the entire group had been eliminated before they could launch a coordinated attack against us. Looking back, I believe that single engagement shifted the momentum of the entire battle. Until that point, the fight had settled into a deadly stalemate. Both sides were exchanging heavy fire, but nobody was making meaningful progress. Brian's quick action changed that. We had surprised the enemy. We attacked with speed. We applied overwhelming violence. Most importantly, we demonstrated that we had no intention of backing away. That aggressive response sent a message across the battlefield. The insurgents suddenly realized they were facing soldiers who intended to keep advancing instead of remaining pinned down. I could see the effect almost immediately. The Iraqi army gained confidence. The soldiers from the 101st Airborne began pushing harder. As we continued attacking one side street after another, every element started moving together instead of fighting isolated battles. Soon we had everyone advancing in a coordinated line. Little by little, block after block, we pushed through the streets of Adamiyah. From the outside, someone reading the citation for my Bronze Star Medal with Valor might think the operation unfolded in a calm, organized fashion. The reality looked nothing like that. The battlefield was absolute chaos. Rounds were cracking overhead. Machine guns echoed from every direction. Explosions shook the streets. Radio traffic never stopped. Vehicles maneuvered through narrow roads while soldiers shouted updates over the noise of combat. Even in the middle of all that confusion, I never felt overwhelmed. The reason was simple. We knew that area better than almost anyone. We had spent months working inside Adamiyah. We understood the terrain. We knew our Iraqi partners. We knew the soldiers from the 101st Airborne. Most importantly, we trusted one another. That familiarity allowed us to stay focused on the mission instead of becoming distracted by the chaos surrounding us. Throughout our deployment, most of our work involved intelligence operations. We spent long hours gathering information, identifying insurgent networks, and building cases against enemy leaders. Now those same fighters were standing directly in front of us. Instead of hunting them through months of intelligence work, we had the opportunity to engage them head-on. That focus helped keep me calm. One phrase we repeated constantly within Special Forces was simple. Calm creates calm. Leaders set the emotional tone for everyone around them. If I appeared nervous, the rest of the detachment would notice immediately. If I stayed composed, everyone else could stay focused on their jobs. That was exactly what I intended to do. I reminded the team that we had trained for situations like this our entire careers. We were prepared. We trusted one another completely. If the enemy wanted to fight us face to face, we were ready to answer. Although we were operating deep inside hostile territory, nobody in my detachment questioned our ability to handle the fight. I also have to give the enemy credit where it was due. They were organized. They coordinated their attacks well. They had prepared the battlefield carefully. One of their smartest tactics involved blocking several streets with obstacles. Those roadblocks forced our vehicles into predictable routes. Whenever we reached one of those intersections, we had no choice but to stop. That was exactly what the insurgents wanted. Each blocked intersection had overlapping fields of fire covering it from multiple directions. As soon as our vehicles halted, they entered what amounted to a carefully planned kill zone. Our gunners could not always provide effective covering fire because buildings and barriers restricted their angles. Someone had to leave the relative protection of the armored vehicles. That responsibility usually fell to me. I climbed out under direct enemy fire and cleared obstacles by hand so our vehicles could continue moving. Every second outside the truck exposed me to rifle fire, machine guns, and rocket-propelled grenades. Still, getting those vehicles moving again was essential. Once they rolled forward, our heavy weapons could dominate the streets again, allowing us to regain the advantage. As the senior enlisted leader, I carried another responsibility that weighed heavily on my mind throughout the fight. Our detachment consisted of only 7 people, 6 Green Berets, 1 interpreter. That was it. We had virtually no room for mistakes. One serious casualty could remove us from the battle entirely. Conditions made the situation even more dangerous. The weather was so poor that no aircraft could support us. There were no helicopters overhead. No close air support, no medical evacuation helicopters standing by. The insurgents understood that. Normally, American forces fought with overwhelming advantages provided by aviation, surveillance, and rapid medical evacuation. That day, none of those advantages existed. This was nothing more than a brutal street fight. If one of my men suffered a catastrophic injury, there would be no quick rescue. Not only would we lose one of our teammates, but our entire detachment would likely have to withdraw, leaving both the Iraqi Army and the 101st Airborne without the support they desperately needed. Every decision I made carried that weight. Every movement mattered. There truly was no margin for error. About an hour to an hour and a half into the battle, our situation became even more complicated. The trail vehicle radioed up to us with an urgent message. They reported that fuel was pouring out behind our truck. Before I could even pass the warning to my driver, the engine quit. Enemy rounds had punched into the engine block. Our vehicle was dead in the middle of a combat zone. We had no choice. We hooked the disabled Humvee to another vehicle and towed it all the way back to Forward Operating Base Apache. The moment we arrived, I got on the radio. I told the support personnel exactly what we needed. Get another vehicle ready immediately, load it with ammunition, then add even more. We had already carried a tremendous amount of ammunition into the fight, but after the amount we had fired that morning, I wanted every available round we could haul. There was no thought of staying behind. We intended to return to the battle as fast as possible. Our replacement vehicle was waiting. We transferred our equipment, reloaded every weapon, topped off our ammunition, and informed the soldiers from the 101st Airborne that we were on our way back. We also packed additional ammunition for them because they had been fighting for hours, and their supplies were running dangerously low. Within a short time, we were rolling back into Adamia. As soon as we rejoined the fight, we delivered the ammunition to the 101st Airborne and immediately resumed the offensive. Early reports estimated that somewhere between 50 and 60 insurgents were operating throughout the area that day. Personally, I believe there were considerably more than that. The fighting was incredibly close. This was not long-range combat where enemies exchanged fire from hundreds of yards apart. We could clearly see where our rounds were striking. We could watch enemy fighters moving from one building to another. Everything happened at distances where every decision counted. As we continued advancing, we gradually forced the insurgents backward. Block by block, intersection by intersection, they gave ground. Eventually, we pushed them all the way to the Abu Hanifa Mosque. Geographically, they had very few options remaining. Behind the mosque lay the Tigris River. With nowhere else to retreat, the surviving insurgents disappeared inside the mosque complex. At that point, every friendly force on the battlefield found itself facing the same direction: the Iraqi army, the soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division, my Special Forces detachment. All of us stood looking toward the Abu Hanifa Mosque. Fortunately, everyone recognized how sensitive that location was. Any firefight involving such an important religious site could have triggered consequences far beyond that day's battle. The insurgents stopped shooting. We held our fire as well. Just like that, the engagement came to an end. Once we confirmed that the fighting had ceased, we contacted the 101st Airborne. I told them that it appeared the enemy had broken contact and that my detachment would return to Forward Operating Base Apache. I also reminded them that if the situation changed again, all they had to do was call. On our drive back, we discovered another serious problem. The Iraqi police had suffered devastating losses during the fighting. The insurgents viewed many members of the Iraqi police as loyal to the Shiite-led government, making them prime targets. Several police officers had been killed. Police vehicles and equipment had been abandoned throughout the streets. Leaving those vehicles behind would have been a major mistake. If the insurgents captured them, they could use the equipment against friendly forces later. We maneuvered our vehicles into secure positions. Several members of my team climbed out, entered the abandoned police vehicles, and drove them back under our protection while the rest of us provided security. It was one more task that needed to be completed before the day finally ended. Later, reports indicated that another small exchange of fire had broken out. We deployed again to investigate. Fortunately, it turned out to be only a minor skirmish. Nothing close to the battle we had fought earlier. When I think back on the 17th of April, 2006, I do not think about medals or citations. I think about survival. That day became what I call my alive day. Time after time, survival came down to inches. A bullet striking a little higher. A rocket-propelled grenade landing a little closer. One delayed decision. One wrong turn. Any one of those moments could have ended very differently. By every measure, I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have walked away from that battlefield alive. People often ask about the Bronze Star Medal with Valor and the citation describing my actions during that engagement. They imagine deliberate planning carried out under perfect control. The truth is much different. Combat is never neat. It is loud. It is violent. It is confusing. The only way to function inside that environment is to simplify everything, Focus on the mission. Trust your training. Trust your teammates. Keep moving. As the senior enlisted leader, I was never thinking only about myself. Every decision affected every man under my responsibility. Because our detachment was so small, every individual mattered. Losing one Green Beret could change the outcome of the entire operation. There was simply no backup waiting around the corner, no reserve force standing by, no quick replacement. Every man carried an enormous share of the mission. That responsibility stayed with me every second of the battle. Even while I was clearing obstacles under enemy fire, directing our vehicles through blocked intersections, and coordinating with both the Iraqi Army and the 101st Airborne Division, I constantly tracked where my men were positioned. I needed to know who had ammunition, who was covering which direction, who might need help, who was exposed. Leadership during combat means thinking several moves ahead while bullets are still flying around you. That responsibility never disappears. It only becomes heavier as the fight continues. Later that deployment, our detachment received recognition as the top operational detachment within the 10th Special Forces Group. The award reflected everything we had accomplished throughout the rotation, not just one battle. One operation that received particular attention was known as Operation Thor's Hammer. It was one of the most creative missions I ever participated in. By the time we inherited the target package, the individual had already been hunted by the Special Forces team that had deployed before us. When our rotation began in early 2006, the responsibility for finding him became ours. This was not an ordinary insurgent. He had American blood on his hands. He financed improvised explosive device operations, supported explosively formed penetrator attacks, and played a major role inside the insurgent network operating throughout Baghdad. Capturing him became one of our highest priorities. The problem was that he was extremely cautious. He understood operational security. He rarely exposed himself. At that point, we did not enjoy the same level of signals intelligence support that larger national organizations had available. We did receive telephone numbers and occasional pieces of information, but we lacked the aircraft, advanced surveillance systems, and technical assets that could continuously monitor a high-value target. That forced us to think differently. Special Forces teams are filled with men who enjoy solving difficult problems. Instead of accepting our limitations, we sat together and started asking ourselves one question. How do we make this man reveal himself? Eventually, someone suggested an old intelligence technique that has existed in one form or another for generations. Use attraction instead of force. The concept was straightforward. An Iraqi woman working with us would accidentally call his telephone number. She would pretend she had dialed the wrong person. During the brief conversation, she would portray herself as a woman in distress whose husband had left her alone. After only a short exchange, she would apologize and end the conversation. That was all. Nothing more. The goal was simply to spark his curiosity. It worked even better than we expected. Instead of forgetting about the call, he contacted her himself. Their conversations continued over the next several weeks. Little by little, they developed what he believed was the beginning of a personal relationship. Eventually, he told her he wanted to meet in person. That was exactly what we had been waiting for. The meeting was arranged at a clothing store located just outside Sadr City. Sadr City was a heavily controlled Shiite neighborhood east of Adamiyah and one of the most dangerous places anywhere around Baghdad. According to the plan, the woman would already be inside the clothing store waiting for him. In reality, she would never be there. Our detachment, Iraqi Army personnel, Iraqi scout platoon members, and additional supporting elements quietly established positions throughout the area. Some waited inside the store, others watched from nearby buildings. Additional security teams covered the streets outside. A quick reaction force remained close enough to respond immediately if anything went wrong. I operated from an unmarked civilian-style sport utility vehicle moving through the neighborhood. From the beginning, we believed the arrest would be simple. We expected him to walk into the store, where our people would quietly detain him before he realized what had happened. Instead, nothing unfolded according to plan. He arrived at the meeting location. He spoke with the woman over the telephone. We knew they were communicating because we could monitor the progress of the operation. But for reasons only he understood, he refused to enter the clothing store. Instead, he remained outside. Even worse, he positioned himself just beyond the observation angle of the personnel watching the entrance. For several tense minutes, we knew he was somewhere nearby, but we could not immediately identify his exact location. Eventually, someone spotted him. Positive identification was confirmed. The operation moved into its final stage. The vehicle carrying me pulled into position. I stepped out without attracting his attention. At the same time, I ordered the quick reaction force to move. As the Humvees approached, he focused his attention on the sound of the armored vehicles coming toward him. He never realized I was closing in from another direction. Within seconds, I reached him. I secured him before he had an opportunity to react. We placed flex cuffs on him and took him into custody without firing a single shot. He was armed. We fully expected that he might draw his pistol and force us into a deadly confrontation. Instead, he surrendered without resistance. Looking back, that decision changed everything. Keeping him alive proved far more valuable than eliminating him. The amount of intelligence we collected from him exceeded anything we had expected. His information identified additional insurgents, exposed networks we had not previously uncovered, and provided leads that fueled numerous operations throughout the remainder of our deployment. In many ways, that single capture established the momentum for everything our detachment accomplished afterward. It became one of the defining successes of our rotation. That operation demonstrated something we believed strongly throughout Special Forces. Firepower solves many problems. Creativity solves many others. Sometimes the most effective weapon on the battlefield is not a rifle or a machine gun. Sometimes it is patience, careful planning, and understanding exactly how your opponent thinks. Operation Thor's Hammer proved that lesson perfectly. Receiving the award for the top operational detachment in the 10th Special Forces Group meant more to me than I can fully explain. To us, it was the military equivalent of winning the championship. When I first joined the unit, I did not even realize such an award existed. Later, I started hearing quiet conversations that our detachment might be nominated. At first, I did not pay much attention to the rumors. Then the possibility became more realistic. When we finally learned that we had earned the honor, every member of the team understood exactly what it represented. It was not recognition for one successful mission. It reflected months of relentless work. Every intelligence operation, every patrol, every raid, every long night, every difficult decision, every risk each member of the detachment accepted throughout that deployment. No one earns an award like that alone. It belongs to the entire team. After serving more than 26 years in the United States Army, I retired in January of 2017. People often ask whether leaving military service was difficult. The answer is yes. Transitioning into civilian life is not nearly as simple as many people imagine. For more than 26 years, the Army had been my profession, my routine, and my identity. Every 2 weeks, I knew exactly where I would be. I understood the mission. I understood my responsibilities. I knew the standards expected of me. Then one day, all of that changed. In many ways, I felt institutionalized. The military becomes your normal way of life. Suddenly stepping away from that environment requires much more adjustment than most people realize. Fortunately, I received help from an organization that assists military veterans as they prepare for civilian careers. One mentor, in particular, made a tremendous difference. She coached me through interviews, helped me improve my communication skills, and explained how employers viewed former service members. At first, I struggled. Inside Special Forces, humility is deeply ingrained. From the very beginning, we are taught never to boast about our accomplishments. Leave your ego behind, put the team first, stay humble. Those values become part of who you are. Without realizing it, I carried that same mindset into every civilian job interview. During one coaching session, my mentor stopped me. She understood exactly where I was coming from. Then she gave me advice that completely changed my perspective. She said, "I understand that you spent your career in Special Forces. I understand why humility matters so much to you. But you have to recognize that you are in a different environment now." She explained that describing my experience was not arrogance. Talking about difficult missions, leadership responsibilities, and accomplishments was not bragging. Potential employers were trying to understand what I could contribute to their organization. If I refused to explain what I had done throughout my military career, I was making their decision much harder. She encouraged me to become comfortable discussing my background honestly and confidently. That conversation stayed with me. It completely changed the way I approached interviews. More importantly, it helped me understand that confidence and humility are not opposites. A person can remain humble while still speaking truthfully about years of hard-earned experience. Looking back today, I encourage every service member preparing to leave the military to find a mentor before making that transition. Do not try to navigate it alone. There are people who understand both worlds. Listen to their advice. Ask questions. Learn from those who have already completed the journey. The military teaches us how to lead soldiers, solve problems under pressure, and accomplish missions that most people will never experience. The civilian world operates differently. Learning how to translate military experience into language that employers understand is a skill of its own. There is no shame in asking for help. In fact, it is one of the smartest decisions a veteran can make. When I look back over my career, I do not measure success by medals, awards, or decorations. Those things are meaningful, but they are not what stay with me. What I remember are the people. The Green Berets who stood beside me. The soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division who refused to quit during one of the toughest firefights of the war. Our Iraqi partners who fought alongside us. The friendships built under impossible conditions. Those experiences shaped the person I became. The battle in Outnumbered remains one of the defining moments of my life. On the 17th of April, 2006, countless things could have gone wrong. A bullet a few inches to the left. A rocket-propelled grenade arriving 1 second earlier. A single bad decision. Any one of those moments could have changed everything. Instead, my team came home. I came home. For that reason, every year I remember that date as my alive day. It reminds me that life is fragile, leadership matters, preparation saves lives, and every day after that battle has been a gift. That lesson has stayed with me far longer than any medal ever could.